Hello and welcome to Sarasota Florida Living Podcast, where we teach you everything Sarasota and the surrounding areas. Hey, have you ever been wondering about Citizens Insurance here in Florida? Well, today we have Chuck Hosie, an amazing insurance guy, and he's going to give us some tips and tricks about Citizens and what's going on with that here in Florida. So now on to the podcast. Welcome to Sarasota Florida Living Podcast, where we help you understand everything Sarasota and the surrounding areas. On this podcast, we interview local businesses and experts to help you find the best people to work with for any of your needs. So sit back and enjoy meeting these wonderful people that help make Sarasota such a wonderful place to live.
So you're my first podcast ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you're the debut. So this is going to be,
awesome.
Hopefully a whole series going forward.
Yeah.
So welcome, and Chuck, and it's Hosie, right?
Yep, that's
because we'll make
correct,
sure people know when they call you.
Yeah.
How to get a hold.
Yeah.
And near the end we'll make sure that we just give them contact information.
Okay.
And then we'll put some slides up. As a realtor, we constantly are asked about real estate and insurance.
Right.
And Florida, with all the stuff that's been going on, it's nuts. I have to take people out, and we're going, okay, we're looking at the house, but I said now insurance is such an issue. They have to think about their purchase because,
right.
If it's a flood zone or it's not a flood zone, with the way the loans are going through now, which I'm going to talk to Chris today about loans because that's going crazy.
Yeah.
With all the extra incentives and all the stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
But, what do you feel is some of the most important things? You said that Citizens is something we really need to discuss because, I'm not exactly sure what Citizens means. Does that mean it's government backed?
Yeah, so Citizens is a state-run insurance company, and was really designed for people that had trouble getting insurance in the regular insurance market. And that's kind of what it was designed for. So it's kind of like a place where, hey, if you can't find a place to put this risk, well, there were Citizens. Now, a lot of people think that, I can just go to Citizens, right?
Right.
It's not the case because there are some qualifications actually to get a policy into Citizens.
Okay.
And there's really two main things that I have to look at. The first one is, can I place it in the regular market? And if I can't place it in the regular market, nobody will take it for whatever reason.
Okay.
Underwriting guidelines have become very, very strict with the carriers.
Right.
A lot of different things. And if I can't find an insurance company to place it with, then I can take and look at Citizens.
Okay.
And the second thing is, if I do a quote and I do find a carrier that will take it, or carriers that will take it, but the premiums are very, very high.
Okay.
Because everybody's looking at premiums and the rates are going up in Florida, right?
Right.
So the second criterion to get into Citizens is that the Citizens rate must be at least 20% less than what the other carriers will offer.
So you already have to know kind of like what the other carriers offer before you can go to Citizens.
Absolutely.
And so Citizens requires you to say, yes, we've been approved for this with these other companies, or do they not?
So basically I'll take a look and I'll do a quote for that particular risk. And like I said, if Citizens rate is 20% less for comparable coverage, then it would qualify to go to Citizens.
Oh, I got you. So they're really comparing to saying, well, we'll do it at this. That company's going to do this. If we're 20% under, we'll take you.
We'll take it. Now, so a lot of people think that, I can just go to Citizens, but I just wanted to make the point that you have to qualify.
Right.
And Citizens does have their own underwriting guidelines, too, that you got to follow. So It's not like I could just go and they're going to take it.
Oh, yeah. We don't need hurricane straps.
Yeah,
we don't care about if you have roof singles. They don't do that.
There's some criteria. So Citizens has made some some changes recently. First of all, the rates for Citizens have changed.
Okay.
They were under a certain rate structure that's changed, so their rates have increased. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been on the news as of late about Citizens raising rates. And I've been getting a lot of calls from clients. Hey, what am I hearing on what's going on with Citizens? I've got a Citizens policy.
That was always the safety net, right?
Right. What's my rate going to be? My rate's increasing. Those type of things. The biggest change that Citizens has made recently is that anybody that has a Citizens policy currently right now, if they're in a designated FEMA flood zone, A or a V, they have to carry flood insurance. Effective July the 1st, 2023, those folks must carry flood insurance.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you were already in flood, the banks would require it, right? So if you were in a flood zone, no matter what, you had to have flood insurance, right?
Great question. But The thing about it is with Citizens is that you have to carry the same amount of flood coverage as you do on your Citizens policy up to the National Flood Insurance program criteria, which is $250,000 on the dwelling and $100,000 on the contents.
Okay.
That's the maximum coverage you can get under the National Flood Insurance program.
Okay.
So where this comes into play in the real estate world, as well as more or less the lending world, is the lender's only required purchaser to carry flood on the dwelling.
Oh, okay.
They never require it on the contents.
Gotcha.
But now with Citizens, okay, as I mentioned before, you have to carry, if you've got contents coverage on your Citizens policy, you're going to have to carry contents on the flood.
Because you're in Citizens. Now, if you're with another policy, they still might not do that. Depends on the company.
Yeah, this
Their
is
standard of
strictly Citizens. So I'm in a situation right now where I have a lot of clients, let's just say, that are in a designated FEMA flood zone, A or a V, let's just say.
Yep.
And now they do have a mortgage, so they had to require flood insurance.
Right.
So, but a lot of those cases, they're only carrying flood on the dwelling because that was the requirement for the lender. And at the time, I've always offered contents coverage when I offer flood.
Right.
It's the client's choice. But in a lot of cases, they just said, oh, I'm just going to take what I'm required by my lender, which is just on the dwelling.
Gotcha.
So now I go back to the Citizens policy. Oh, they have 75,000 contents coverage on their Citizens policy. I have to go back and readjust the flood coverage to include 75,000 on the contents.
Right, which brings obviously the price up.
Which their flood insurance now is going to go a little higher because now they're required to carry flood on the contents as well.
Wow.
So that's one of their criteria. Now, so that's for the folks that are in the FEMA designated flood zones, right?
Right.
So what about the ones that are not in the designated FEMA flood zones?
That was my next question. So you beat me. Obviously, you've heard this before.
Yeah. So I'm not in a designated FEMA flood zone, but so starting in January 1st, 2024.
2024. Okay.
Anybody that is not in a designated FEMA flood zone that has a Citizens policy, anybody that their dwelling coverage is over 600,000, they're going to require to carry flood.
Okay, so
coverage.
over 600,000.
Over 600.
Okay.
And then January 1st, 2025, anybody that carries 500,000 or more will be required to carry flood. And then the following year, January 1st, 2026, anybody with a dwelling coverage with Citizens of 400,000 will be required.
Wow.
And then January 1, 2027, all Citizens policies will have to carry flood insurance.
They're easing you into it, but it's coming.
They're easing you into it, but it's coming. But currently right now, when I do write somebody a Citizens policy and they're not in a designated flood zone now, so they don't require the flood coverage now, but they have to sign a flood affirmation document that basically states, I know that I'm going to have to purchase flood insurance as long as I have a Citizens policy. I affirm that I will purchase flood. So they have to sign that now, even though they're not going to need it down the road.
Okay.
Okay.
What would require me to go to Citizens? So I'm just kind of going back to basic insurance 101, right?
Yes.
So why would I need to go to Citizens? I mean, what would be maybe two of the three main things why I couldn't get regular insurance?
Yeah, well, the main thing is right now is that the underwriting guidelines for the insurance carriers have tightened so much right now. That's the first thing. So it may not fit within there. It could be. See, a lot of the carriers, they go by age of the roof.
So that was going to be an important thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, age of the roof, where Citizens, they go by how many years are left on the roof.
Okay.
Now, when I say that, though, the roof still has to be in good shape.
Right.
Okay. So it's not just the age of how many years are left. It still has to be in good shape.
Right.
But they go by how many years are left on the roof. So in a lot of cases, if you have a client and it may not fit in the regular market, you may not, or they don't want to, you can't place it because of an underwriting guideline.
Right.
Then you may have to go to Citizens.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why somebody may have to go.
Well, and we could probably just even spend a whole day just on roofs, but because now when I take clients out or customers and look at property, I never really. I mean, you always think about roofs and you think about the seller's disclosure, The seller tells you everything's going on. But now when we go look at homes, we look at new construction.
Yep.
And then we'll look at a house that's 10 years old.
Yes.
Well, the first thing I have to think about, because it's always roof, AC, and plumbing. Those are the things I always worry about with the new purchase as a resale. But now if it's 10 years old, you're like, plenty of time. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now regular carriers are like, shingle roofs, 10 or 12, we're going to ask you to do some replacements, or we're going to really cramp down on you. So I think tile is like 14. I'm not sure the numbers, but I know it's becoming halfway through the life of the roof. They won't insure you. Yeah, you got to really watch. That has become a big thing in Florida, is the age of the roof. And all the carriers, the toughest part for me is all the carriers they all have their own underwriting guidelines. Right. So some may be this age, some may be that age. There's no federal rule they have to follow. It's just what they're willing to risk. What they're willing to risk is their underwriting guideline. Yeah. Right. So those are some of the changes and the rules with Citizens. And what's crazy about it? We'll probably end up meeting every month, because who knows what next month's going to bring, right? I mean, we see each other at the gym all the time, and you're kind of like, Dan, last week I told you this, but maybe let's talk later because it changed already, Yeah. And I also want to make one more point before I forget, which I always tell all my clients, particularly if I'm going to put with Citizens. There are some restrictions too with Citizens that people need to know. Okay. And a couple of them are with coverages. They only do offer 100,000 liability in their policy. And a lot of people here have pools and cages, and with Hurricane Ian, a lot of those cages were damaged. Okay. Right? And Citizens doesn't cover that. So they don't cover the cages around the pool. That's one of the exclusions. Okay. So, and why I'm talking about cages, what I really want to emphasize here, it's not the screening that's covered, because a lot of people, because screens can rip all day long. Right. It's actually the structure and the frame of the cages, what they're covering. But the other big thing with Citizens, because remember, it is a state-run insurance company, right? Right. And the fact that if Citizens ever got into a situation where they could not pay claims, like for example, Hurricane Ian. Right. They had so many claims. Let's say they didn't have enough funds to pay the claims. Did you know that they can actually go to each policyholder and assess them a percentage of their premium to help pay the claims? Now, is that new, or is that? No, that's been. It's always been in place. It's been in place, and so I guess when you're moving to Florida, you're like, okay, let me pick the target zones, because but they could assess everybody across the board, or just in that area. You think? No, they can assess all policyholders across the board. Yeah, right across. Saying the board. We need more money in the fund. We know more money in a fund, and that's even though you live in Fort Lauderdale and things are going bad here, everybody's policy across the board goes up. They can do it. They can assess each policyholder up to a certain percentage of whatever you pay on your premium. Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So there are some things that's going into Citizens that as an agent, that is my responsibility to make sure that this person, hey, we are putting you with Citizens. This is the reason why, but you really need to know all these things that go with it. Right. So Citizens is obviously, would you say just in Florida? Now, Citizens is a national? No, it's Florida. Just Florida. It's Florida, yeah. So when would you say 40% of people are in Citizens, or 10% of people in Citizens? Or? I don't know the exact number, but I can certainly tell you the population within Citizens has grown. Because of the other companies saying, we just won't do that. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Because a lot of, without getting in too deep, a lot of the insurance companies, they got to purchase what they call reinsurance. Okay. So they're insuring themselves, and it all comes to capacity. How much capacity does an insurance company have to write in the state of Florida? It's not like the insurance companies can write as many policies as they want. Right. They do have a limit that they can write. And when they do reach that limit, they can start shutting it down and saying, we're not taking any new business for a while. Right. And that does happen as well. And that's probably why a lot of the companies just packed up, because they hit limits so quickly. They just said, we're out of here. So, it's hard. So, yeah, it's a market that probably the toughest market that I've ever worked in. Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, do you cover more than just Florida yourself? Are you licensed more in Florida? Or? I just do Florida. Florida only, okay. Yeah, just do Florida. Okay. Yeah. So we just make sure everybody knows. But I have done insurance in other places, and I'll tell you, Florida is unique. By far the hardest. Yeah, it is unique. Well, and it's constantly changing, right? It's constantly changing. So and as a realtor and for our team that's here, we it was just like a mention. Now it's one of the main concerns before we even start going looking and say, okay, first of all, we're trying to help you find the area you want to be in a school district or close to the water, not close to water. But now all of a sudden, insurance is like a number one concern because the expense is, could be as much as some taxes sometimes, or as much as a CDD because out of nowhere it just changes.
Well, and I think what's really changed in your industry is that when you're out showing homes now, one of the things you're thinking about, okay, is this house insurable?
Absolutely.
Are we able to get insurance on this house? Or if we can, what needs to be done to this house to be able to get insurance? Or is my client going to have an expense because they got to replace this, or this? Where maybe years ago you never really had to worry about that much, and now you do.
4 or 5 years ago when we started working together, maybe longer. I could call you with somebody, especially investors, like, oh yeah, we just want a house that's built in the 50s. We're going to gut it and this and that, and need a new panel. And you're like, okay, this is what it'll be. Now it's like, when people call me, I'm like, oh my gosh, insurance, this is not going to happen. You're going to replace some panels and roofs, and and they're like, no, we're just going to paint it up a little bit and seal these holes, and we're good. Yeah, you're not going to get insurance.
or they say, well, you know what? I'm gonna take care of all these things after I close.
Yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Because once an insurance company binds that risk, they're on the hook.
Yeah.
So if there are things that need to be done, they're going to want those done prior to them taking on that risk.
Right. So I mean, you can pay cash and not worry about insurance, but eventually they're going to, they're still, if they ever get insurance, because we're in hurricanes, and storms and lightning and all the other stuff.
Exactly. And there's just so many things to look at. I mean, one of the big things too, look at, people buy houses with these big, beautiful trees, which is nice.
Yeah.
But if they're overhanging the house and they're overhanging the roof, that's an insurance risk.
Yeah.
I mean, because that, any wind comes along and knocks those branches on the roof, now you got damage.
Right.
So that's another thing you got to keep an eye out if you've got trees surrounding the house. As a realtor, the first thing you look at, okay, how close are they to the house, and are these trees overhanging the roof line? Because that will be an insurance problem.
Yeah. So I would say, what would you think the top 3 insurance issues are? You couldn't get insurance. I mean, obviously the roof age.
The roof is probably
electrical panels,
the first
maybe.
thing. Yeah, electrical panels. Yeah, there's certain brands that a lot of the carriers won't take.
Right.
They're higher risk.
So we have to get those changed out prior to closing.
Those type of things. And the other big thing that's I've really noticed in the last little while is the water heater.
Okay.
Because there has been some damage to the water heaters. Causing water damage.
Are they going by the age, basically?
They're going by the age, yeah.
Well,
so a good
at least
rule,
it's only $1,000 or less, right?
Yeah, a good rule of thumb, is the water heater should be less than 15 years of age. That's a good rule of thumb to look at.
And roof would be 10?
Yeah, I would say
rule of thumb.
Yeah. If it's a shingle roof, I would use 10. But like I said, all the carriers are different, so it does have a little bit of fluctuation there.
Well, that's good because and I was under the impression before this that just in general, the insurance companies are calling you at 10 years, but it depends on who your carrier is.
Depends on who the carrier is, but it's a good age to take a look at.
But it's good to worry about when we're out looking at homes like, oh, you're at 10 years. You better hope you find the right one. Call Chuck.
Because in days in the past, probably realtors never really had to focus on how old the roof is.
No.
Or,
I mean, just 3 years ago, it wasn't. I mean, it was a concern, but it was not like
3 years ago. Was 20 shingle roofs are 20 years.
It wasn't the main conversation. Now it's like
no.
We're definitely talking about roof AC and plumbing, and now hot water heaters.
Now hot water heaters,
right.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
So how do you started with a new company? You started your own new company? Is that what it was? So what's the name of your company now?
Canusais Insurance.
Okay, and we'll definitely leave links to how to get a hold of you and everything, and they can mention they saw you on a podcast, and then we can just build the business together. But is there anything that people need to know about how you guys do your business that maybe separate you from maybe the next insurance person?
Well, the one thing that I like to do is I don't want the insured to have any surprises,
right,
when it comes to insurance, and I really want to, because most of my business comes from people like you and realtors.
Referral, yeah.
And I treat them, or I'd like to treat them as well as you're going to treat them. So, because you're giving me that referral, I want that. Excuse me. I want that person to go back to you and say, hey, he did a really good job. And what I think I do, I really want to take the time and explain the coverages to the person so they fully understand what they're getting in their insurance policy, or what maybe some of the exclusions may be.
Right.
And you know what? I think it goes a long way to take that extra time up front
Right.
and explain everything to them.
And I know you've lost policies by being so honest, right? You're like, hey, this is really what it is,
Yes.
you know, and
Yeah.
please shop it, you know,
Yeah.
but this is what we can do. And this is why I'm most comfortable offering you because, you know, there's other things out there, but it's not as clean and clear.
Yeah,
you know?
and I really like to do my due diligence on the front end because when I give a rate to somebody and then they go to close, that's the rate.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It may vary just a little bit, but like I said, I'd rather do the due diligence up front.
As long as we close within 60 days. Now, you know, 2 years out, then, you know,
Exactly.
you don't know.
Just make sure they understand exactly what they have because what happens in a lot of times is like Hurricane Ian comes along or people have claims and then, I didn't know I didn't have this, or I didn't know my coverage was only this, or I didn't know I had to add wind coverage to my screen enclosure, all these type of things.
Right. You know, it's funny that you saying that is kind of brought this other question up is there certain sections of Florida that would that has like more risk than others, or they just
Great question.
They just make it a blanket?
No, absolutely. They when they do the risk modeling,
Right.
They take a lot of factors in on distance to coast, prior claim activity or weather activity
For that area.
I've noticed recently, down in south of Venice, the Nokomis, the Inglewood, Port Charlotte area,
Cape Coral, down.
the rates are a little higher. So the insurance company do the risk modeling based on a lot of different factors, and one of them is prior weather activity.
How
claim
often do they
history.
assess that? Just quarterly, yearly?
They're looking at that all the time.
Yeah, whatever we got to do.
I don't know exactly how often they do it, but I know that they're doing it all the time. And, but yeah, so and another thing is there's so many different factors that go into getting an insurance quote. A lot of people say, "Hey, here's an address. Can just give me a quote." You're right. Well, are you using it for primary residence? Is it a rental property?
Right. Investment? Is it
secondary
Airbnb,
home?
short term?
Yeah. So, a lot of different factors go into rating, such as, the occupancy of the property or the exterior structure. Is it frame? Is it all concrete block? Is the roof shingle? Is it tile? Distance to coast is another big factor in rating. How close are you to the water? I have another carrier that just recently put in an eligibility that if your home is 3 miles to the coast, regardless if you're in a designated FEMA flood zone or not, they're requiring you to carry flood insurance.
No matter what, 3 miles in the coast.
If your house is within 3 miles of the coast, you have to carry flood insurance.
Now, does flood insurance, I'm being stupid here, cover wind, or is it is there?
The easiest way to describe flood is rising water.
Okay.
And that can come from a couple different things. Obviously, if we're having high winds or we're having a hurricane and you get the storm surge, the water pushes in, that's rising water, right?
Right.
Because you'll see that on the news all the time, and things are flooded out.
Right.
What else is really causing, and why they sometimes reevaluate the flood zones, is all the new construction that's going up.
Right.
And then that changes the flow of the water. And so another way you can get it, let's say, like, for example, behind my house, I have a lake.
Right.
What if we get torrential downpours for days on end, and now the water in the lake starts to rise?
Right.
And it starts to come on my property and towards my house.
Right.
That's rising water.
As soon as one person in that neighborhood claims something that you got done, that whole neighborhood probably falls into it. So
that's the easiest way to kind of think about what flood is I would say, is rising water.
Do people purchase wind, or is that a different insurance policy, or is wind part of like the general policy?
Yes, totally it is. Yeah. I mean, there are some policies and some circumstances that I run into depending on where the property is. If it's on a barrier island, where we're in a tough market right now, where the carriers just won't offer wind, and you can't get wind coverage.
Right.
But most often, yes, you're trying to place a policy with wind as well. Yeah.
Great. Well, is there any other hidden secrets that we should know off the top of your head, or
there's lots.
That's why they call you, right? Because you shop everybody out there and make sure that you're putting your customer in the right spot. And we actually use you for our stuff and commercial.
Yeah.
So you do commercial stuff also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And is there a limit on what you do for commercial? Like,
industrial or
No, there's really no limit actually.
No?
I just insured a guy's excavator yesterday.
Okay.
I've got air conditioning companies.
Okay.
Yeah, all different
Chemicals and all that different
Yeah,
stuff
all
going
different
involved.
stuff, yeah.
So, well, I really appreciate you coming in, and I'm see you at the gym, and
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you, and we'll put all the contact information, and hopefully we can reach out. And I know I refer all my clients to you because, again, I look at you as part of my team, and the same thing you just said, right? If I can just turn you over, and he might say I can't do it or I can do it, but he'll tell you.
Yeah.
And everybody's seems to be taken care of. Now, not always happy with the answer you give them,
Right.
But it's the truth. I'm sorry that
Yeah.
you're going to have to go Citizens, or we don't even know if that can get insured. You might have to invest another $100,000 in that property, but at least when they're not in the in the clouds trying to figure out what's going to happen. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's really my responsibility to give all the information to the client.
Right.
And then give them enough information that they can make an informed decision. And that's my responsibility. I need to give them all the information that they need so they can make the final decision on what they want, and
Right.
what coverages they want, where they want to go. But I have to give them that information.
okay, well, we'll make sure they get it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everything. Thanks
Okay.
for coming. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right.
It's great.